Learning is the only thing the mind never exhausts, never fears, and never regrets. Leonardo da Vinci. Learning and how to learn is our today's topic. Welcome, and we are happy that you are here. My name is Manuela Sattlegger, and I am your host today. It would be great if you ask questions in writing. Our speakers will answer it during the talk or at the end. And also you will get a recording of this talk. Welcome to our speakers, Peter Goldsborough and Werner Sattlegger. Hello.
Hello.
Peter, greetings to Seattle. Hello.
Hello, indeed.
Werner Sattlegger is CEO of The Art of Life, author and speaker, organizes learning journeys and boot camps for European companies at the Silicon Valley. Werner, why is our topic today, how to close the skill gap, so important right now?
Yeah, hello everybody. Looking forward to our talk. We are living now in very intensive times of uncertainty. The pandemic causes a lot of damage. But on a broader context, we are living in the world of transformation from a kind of old way of working and economy to a different, a new way of working. It's really a dramatic and radical transformation. And this does not mean a different kind of software or IT. This really means a different kind of how we work, how we are in relation in organizations, how we build up business models. So having said this, we have now a very short window, 4, 5, 6 years to approach this transformation and to adopt it. And this is not a question of nice to have, rather than a question of all in, because being in this game, staying in the game means to adopt skills, to reskill, to upskill, learning as a joyful, lifelong process, which is an integrated part in our society and business. So I'm very happy to talk about this today.
Yeah, thank you, Werner. Peter, we have met 2018 at Facebook in Palo Alto. And at this time, you were just 20 years old and already a specialist in artificial intelligence. You were born in Carinthia and finished high school in Villach. And as I remember, you didn't have computer science on your school schedule. Is this right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I picked that up. Yeah.
And then you, after the final exam, you jumped directly to the best known companies, Google and Facebook. How did you manage it and got an expert in such short time without finishing your studies at the Technical University in Munich?
Yeah, I think the story starts around when I was 16. My father was trying to find something that I could, spend my life doing, and so he made me try a bunch of different skills, from programming, which I ended up doing, all the way to playing the guitar, just to see if there was something that I would find would be passionate about and could see myself doing for a long time. And I did kind of stick with programming, and I was really excited by what it allowed me to do, and found a bit of a passion for it. And I think having this passion was pretty much the source of the success I've had since then, because having a passion makes you motivated, and motivation means that you're excited about learning more about this passion. And so I just invested a lot of time in sharpening my skills on my own, and did a couple of internships at the University of Klagenfurt before I graduated from high school, and then just before I was on my way to Munich for university, a recruiter from Google reached out to me about doing an internship. The source of that was that I had had a blog on the internet for a long time, and they kind of got attentive to me and saw my LinkedIn, and they made a big bet on offering an 18-year-old an internship at Google. But I think that's pretty much that was kind of the start of my corporate career. After that, I went to Munich, where I studied for about a year. And I mean, I guess I already knew most of the things that they were teaching me in the first year of college. And after that, I did my internship at Google, and I did a couple of more internships. And at the last one, which was at Facebook, they offered me a full-time position, under the condition that I wouldn't go back to school, of course. And so, yeah, after 1 year in college and 1 year of internships, I just hopped right into the corporate world, and that's been my present since then.
Yeah, so there we are already right in the topic. So what really impressed me was this leaving of old stuck patterns. Normally people in Austria try to get the Matura, try to have the university degree, and then maybe wait, and you can make it shorter. And what really impressed me was this, is this very joyful approach to learning. Because when I remember my school time at my university was more or less overdubbed by fear and a fear of failing and all this stuff, and a lot of learning by heart. But then in my case, I really experienced the last years, and I will come on later, how I can awake a joy and a pleasure and like a very deep inside DNA of life, that learning is life. And it took me quite a while. So what I'm interested, you did live in Villach, and you were not focusing on HTL or something like this. How did you come on Friday night how did you practically learn your skills on a very practical way?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the fortunate thing about computer science or programming is that it is a very practical skill. It's not like I think there's other skills, like say I was interested in medicine, right? That would be a lot harder for me to practice on my own on the weekend, without hurting anybody. So I think I was fortunate that what I did enjoy doing was a skill that, for one, I think you can learn on your own on the internet. There's so many resources that teach people how to program for free, from expert teachers. So I think the abundance of knowledge out there was very helpful. And then lastly, I think also, I mean, I just really found it very fun. Like I liked what it allowed me to do. I was trying to build as many things with these new skills that I'd gathered as possible. And as I mentioned, I think because I had found a passion for it, learning became natural. It's I think anybody who's ever sort of like picked up a new hobby, say I don't know, like jigsaw puzzles, understands that if you have a passion, learning and becoming better at that skill is natural. It's something that you like to do because you want to become better. And so I was really exactly in that mode. So even though, on Friday when other kids would, be happy that the week is over and go play video games, I, went to my laptop and just enjoyed learning more about this skill, because of, what it allowed me to do next, or what it allowed me to build. And so again, the passion, I think, was the most important thing.
Was there anything that you did miss in your school time? Was there anyone, a coach, a mentor, a person who guided you? So there is a fit of your skills and of your doing. So a career coaching, something like this. Did you experience something like this, or did you miss it?
So certainly not in school. I mean, there was no career coach in school. I mean, I remember, I think one time they sent some career coach who made everybody answer some questions, and at the end it sort of told you what your future was. But I think everybody thought that was pretty ridiculous, and nobody really took it seriously. I do think that one of the big things missing in our education system is this concept of mentorship or somebody coaching. I mean, teachers, who have 20 students in one class and, across all of their classes, maybe, 300 students, they have absolutely no time or probably interest in mentoring people. That's just not, what their job description is. Their job description is to, make kids understand, the books, and then give them exams and make sure they understand what's in the book. They're not really incentivized to really take or to mentor young people. And I think that's actually a big problem. That's one of the big missing parts of our education system, because if you think of how most so like famous people in history learned, whether it's Da Vinci, who we heard a quote from the beginning, or really anybody of name, they usually always had a mentor, somebody who taught them the ropes, who at least guided them in the right direction. And I mean, in my case, so even though I didn't have that in school, my father was a bit of a guiding light. He didn't, he knew nothing about programming, but he at least taught me that this is something that I should look into, and he made sure that I do focus on it once in a while. And just on that note, I think one of the reasons why I ended up quitting the University of Munich and starting full time is I noticed that in the corporate world, at least in the computer science or high tech world, mentorship is a much more important factor than it is in the education system. So in a high tech company like Facebook, mentorship is literally part of the job description. So if you're an engineer who's been there for more than a couple of years, it is part of your job to mentor younger engineers. When they start on the team, you're supposed to teach them the ropes. You're supposed to teach them how to be productive in that environment, how to become a better engineer. And you're really evaluated as a more senior engineer of how well you teach younger engineers. And so there's this whole mentorship and sort of like teaching culture between engineers, which you unfortunately never get in education, except if you reach like a master's level where you have a PhD advisor or a master's advisor. But for the first 16 years of our education, there's very, very limited mentorship, and I think that's a shame.
So the point is, teaching is sharing knowledge, teaching is guiding. This is very funny because this is what I experienced in my corporate world. I mean, the double age than you am now already 53, and what I experienced in my experience in corporate world is like people go for learning in a workshop or do an MBA. This is maybe once in a year for 2 or 3 days, and they usually people are very close-minded, don't tend to share. And what I experienced, the joy of sharing is collaboration and participating. And I did, I don't know, 8 years of executive leadership training, and all the time I was asking people in the organizations, in which part did you learn most? And it was not the knowledge transfer, it was not the teaching, it was not the I don't know, reading books. It was the sharing of experiences, the collaboration, the sharing of how did I experience this, how did you experience this, and most of all the experience of an interdisciplinary. So I have the branch, I don't know, industry, then you are in the services, you're in the medical health, you are probably in a different health. So on the basic run, you normally have similar challenges: how to lead people, how to evoke passion, how to find a strategy, how to, I don't know, enable new business models. So there are similar challenges, even more now in this pandemic. So what I figured out, this approach of sharing, of collaboration, of giving my experience to another person is in the Silicon Valley on the West Coast, because we met you there, much more educated and much more lived and much more common. In Austria, your Western culture is much more like, even in organizations, people tend to be very separated, and it's kind of competitive, who is bigger and better and more to show off. And this is really, because I really experienced a lot of fun in sharing and growing together. So that's what I experienced in your case. And most of all, that learning is has to be a practical approach. You told me you always learn this kind of micro and lean learning. Maybe you can give us a little bit of glimpse. You do all these online courses. How do you do this in a practical way when you do it now, right now in your daily job?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, the most underappreciated thing is that there's so much knowledge on the internet that's free, and that if you have the interest, is out there for you. And one thing I think is great about the internet is that when you enroll in your university and you take a course, it can happen, and I'm sure it's happened to everybody, that your professor is pretty bad at teaching, or just not very clear. Whereas the nice thing about the internet is it's sort of a free market. If you go to a YouTube video to learn about something on a Friday afternoon and you find that the presenter is not very clear, you can just switch to the next YouTube video with a better presenter. So you have so much more choice, kind of like, you know, when you go to the supermarket, you have 6 choices for everything. When you look for education online, you have the same amount of choice. And this choice is really fantastic in terms of like finding the best teacher, especially since, you know, everybody learns differently. And online, you have a lot of opportunities for finding different ways to learn. And again, there's so many different, you know, websites for courses. There's Coursera, Udacity, just YouTube. There's random blogs. I mean, even I write, you know, I have a blog where I write about technical subjects once in a while. Usually it's, you know, I learn something and then I write about it on my blog just because it helps me to like, you know, make this knowledge firmer in my mind when I have to explain to somebody. At the same time, somebody who needs this knowledge can come by my blog and learn it there. And so again, I think it's, you know, it's this knowledge sharing, which is very abundant online. And so if you want to learn something, it's all out there.
It's much easier than 20 years ago or 30 years ago, where it was very hard to get information. So it's really a good time.
Yeah.
So, Manuela, maybe you have got in the meanwhile some further questions from the audience.
Well, I would like to encourage our participants to ask questions. Right now, we have only one, and it's about culture between Europe and the West Coast, about the mindset. So, Peter, where do you see the differences and maybe the advantages and disadvantages?
Yeah, I think I mean I have 2 thoughts. I mean, for one, so like you know, relating to Austria, we have this this almost unique focus on titles, where, you know, one really funny thing is if you have like 4 doctor titles, you know, you put all 4 of them in your name, and you even put them in your passport. Whereas in the US, you know, you would only put 1 doctor, and you would still call the person Bob. So that is a big difference. It's sort of like this emphasis or this focus on titles, which also again feeds into, you know, back to this idea that you know, you have to get a college degree to become successful, and it doesn't really matter what your skills are. It matters more what piece of paper you have. But so that's one you know, a difference, because certainly in Silicon Valley or on the West Coast or anywhere in the US, I think titles are a lot less important and people are more pragmatic. Even though that differs from industry to industry. My industry, the high-tech industry, is really in the forefront of you know, focusing on skills rather than so like or pieces of paper or diplomas. I think one reason for that is that the high-tech industry is sort of like born on the shoulders of, you know, people who invented things in their garages and who didn't really have formal education. Most of the big innovators or and achievers and CEOs of high-tech companies in the past few decades have been, you know, very unusual dropouts, whether it's Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. All of these names were, you know, people who had informal education backgrounds. And so I think that's why the high-tech industry acknowledged that, okay, clearly if these, you know, dozens of successful people can do it, maybe it doesn't really matter that they didn't have a degree, it just matters what they can do. And so that's, you know, that's certainly something that I don't see anywhere in Europe. I think, you know, from what I've heard, even though I've worked at Facebook for 3 years, I have about 4 years of industry experience. If I were to go to Germany right now and apply for a computer science job, I would have a really hard time because I don't have a bachelor's degree, and that's quite, you know, incredible if you think about it. I mean, like, I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I don't have, you know, the diploma that everybody else has, and therefore I would have a hard time. And I think that's a big problem, unfortunately.
And this is very
Okay.
actually discussion now in Austria. We have got this title industry and ghostwriting, and everybody is seeking. So I have a short question. Do you earn more in the US or where you are when you have a bachelor or a doctor title, or did that, because in Austria it's usually like this, people earn more, get more money when they have got the title?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, for PhDs, and at least in the computer science world, a PhD usually means that you're an expert in a certain field. And so, you know, in the world of AI, for example, if you have a PhD in artificial intelligence, you do get paid more. You do get a better title, but that's because you really know what you're doing, and you've spent, you know, 6 years on top of, the other 4 years of education to get there. So those people get paid more, and I think that's right. When it comes to like average employees, as in like not so like people who are experts and who are hired as experts, for just like a random sort of like software engineer, it really makes no difference. I think I remember when I interned at Facebook, if you had a master's degree, you would get paid like $500 more, I think, per month or something. So which was like 5%. So it's like a 5% difference, and after your first year, it goes down to nothing. Like it just averages out. So if you think about those 2 extra years that person spent getting a master's degree, it's a really bad return on investment.
Yeah, in Austria it's different. In Austria already people try to get this academic degree and title, and then they get more paid, although they have less practical experience and sometimes less practical knowledge. And so this is really sometimes a little bit of waste of time, because the time is moving so fast, and the curricula of universities and schools are more or less usually behind the normal development, because it takes a long time, the bureaucracy, to adapt the curricula of universities to adopt this certain need.
Yeah, and I do think it's actually good to think of it as a return on investment, because if you consider that a master's degree takes like 2 years, and you could spend those 2 years in industry working the job, like if you take pretty much any job and you compare somebody who has 2 years of experience on that job versus somebody who spent 2 years learning how to do that job in a degree, the person who's been doing it is almost always going to be more effective and a better employee and a better hire. And so getting this experience, I think, is actually more important. And sometimes getting a degree actually just keeps you from getting the experience, which is actually more valuable. And oftentimes that's just because it's required by society or required by the job description. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, this is really an output of bureaucracy and of this superficial word. The title doctor is more important than the learning value. And I experience this in organizations, like the value of learning, sharing, and failing is still very touched by fear and shame, and blocks the people not going ahead and going further. And so we stick still on, I don't know, companies paying employees their MBA, or I don't know, paying workshops in I don't know, go to Fontainebleau for 2 weeks in summer. But I think it would be much more important to establish a learning structure, a learning philosophy, and a learning culture in organization, that learning is an everyday process based on sharing, collaboration, and teaching. And I guess I experience so many HR departments who more or less kind of organizing and bureaucracy of organizing workshops. But this is, I mean, a workshop is good, but it's only a micro piece. I think it is everything moving so fast that learning has to be really established on an everyday basis, and this has to be starts in the mindset of the people, which is not covered by shame and fear, but by joy and by development. This is my thing.
And I think one of the most valuable skills that you can have today is being able to learn things quickly. There's for example, in the interviews that I do like 2-3 interviews per week right now, and one of the things we really care about is, does this person seem like they will be able to learn things quickly? Because especially in our industry, things move so quickly, and every year the technologies change, and so we can't really hire people based on what they know right now. We have to hire them based on their ability to learn things in the future, and that's something that's very important to us. And sometimes it's even more important than what they know right now. Like, I've sat in many hiring discussions where we were like, okay, this person didn't really, he wasn't fantastic at what we asked him to do, but he seems like he's able to learn things very quickly. And then we still hire that person because that's something that we really care about, and we care about whether that person is easy to teach. And so sometimes we ask the question, would you do you think you could mentor that person into becoming coming up to scratch very quickly? And if the answer is yes, if the person seems to be able to learn quickly, then that's very valuable. That's more valuable than just what they know at that moment.
How do you recognize that someone is learning quickly? What are the...
Yeah, I think one of the signals we look for is how quickly they can understand something. So for example, if we're asking them for a problem and they don't know the answer, that's one thing. If we explain the answer to them and they still don't understand it, that's kind of more of a problem. If we lay it out there, if we explain it in very basic things and they don't understand it, that kind of like shows that they have trouble sort of understanding things. If we can explain it to them and they immediately understand it, they put the dots together, that makes sense, that's very valuable, because that means that if there's a different problem where they don't know the answer, they can be explained that answer, or they can find it out online, and that they can figure it out on their own. And actually, there's another kind of interview that we do where we sometimes we'll give somebody a problem, and we'll give them like just 8 hours to just go home, use the internet, use whatever you want, look up the answer, as long as you can solve the problem. And so that's a different approach, where since usually when we ask interview questions, it's like closed room, no internet, you're supposed to like know everything off the top of your head, like most school exams. And so instead we have this open book approach where we allow people to look up things online and solve the problem that way. And I think that's actually a lot more valuable, because if you think of an employee in their day-to-day job, we really appreciate if people can solve problems by looking things up online or just asking people. That's what we want to have.
So he doesn't have all the knowledge in his brain, but the capacity to adapt, to be flexible, to be curious, and to develop and adapt things.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's great.
And I think that's more important. I mean, I would much rather hire somebody who can find the answer to something online on the internet than somebody who just if they don't know something, they just can't solve it, and they've never heard of the idea of Googling something.
Before I give back to Manuela, I covered the recent survey of the World Economic Forum in Davos. We will going to enclose it in the email. And there were 3 skills that are the most important within the 5 years. And the number 1 is exactly what you explained. It's the so-called complex problem solving, the capacity to think in different patterns and to adapt the situation and to find a solution. The second one is critical thinking. And the third one is creativity and the capacity to set steps, to set initiations, to go further.
Yeah,
okay, Manuela. Yeah.
Okay, there are some questions about motivation. Mm-hmm. Peter, what is your driver of motivation to self-study?
Yeah, I think that's an important question, because I think that's sort of like the biggest question is to how do you keep learning? Is how do you find the motivation to learn? And I think for me the most important thing is that you have to do something that you actually enjoy. It's finding a passion. That's that should be the foundation of any kind of education. Should be giving people a way of finding something that they love to do. Because if you love to do what you're doing, then you automatically want to become better at it. You automatically have the motivation to learn, to look online for ways of becoming better. Like if you have a passion for playing soccer, you automatically try to look at the soccer players on television and see what they're doing better. You automatically want to become better. And so I think that's why the number one thing you have to do is find something that you enjoy doing, something that when it's sunny outside on a Saturday afternoon, you're still inside doing that because you love doing it. And so I think that's the most important thing, and everything else comes from that. If you have a passion, the motivation to learn comes on its own. Of course, there also has to be a drive. I mean, a willingness to become better. Some people, they like doing something, like they like knitting, but they don't necessarily want to become better at knitting. So there, along with this passion, you also have to have a drive to become better, and that comes from wanting to grow in your job, or just I think so. Like ambition is an intrinsic quality that some people have and that you can develop. And if you combine passion with ambition, learning comes naturally. And so I think the most important thing is just teaching people or helping people to find something that they love. And that's something that, our education system today actually does not do at all. Neither in middle school, high school, there's absolutely no intent at helping people to find what they like to do. You're supposed to just, I think the approach is more like, we'll show you a little bit of everything. We'll give you 1 hour of biology a week, 1 hour of math, 1 hour of history, and you're supposed to figure out after 8 years that one of those things is something that you enjoy doing. And as a matter of fact, most people don't figure out after high school what they want to do. And then in college, it's kind of a continuation of that. You have to sort of pick one field of study that you like, but even then, there's very little support in trying to help you to find what you like to do. It's really expected that people figure that out on their own. And unfortunately, most people don't figure that out on their own, and then they're stuck with something that they don't like to do, and then they're stuck in a job that they don't enjoy doing. And if you're stuck in a job that you're not passionate about, then learning becomes a torture, right? If you hate what you do and you do it 5 days a week, and then you're supposed to sit down on a Saturday morning and learn more about it, that would be torture. So that's why it all goes back to finding something that you're passionate about. That's the most important thing.
There's a wide ongoing, only one sentence, a wide ongoing academic discussion that passion and talent are not necessarily the same. There's the famous example of Albert Einstein, who loved to be a cello player, but his talent was in different fields, mathematics. So talent and passion doesn't necessarily go together. And the approach that say passion is fine, but you have to have a certain talent, and then you have to, of course, to have this perseverance to keep on going and so on. Would you consider passion more important than talent?
I do think so, yeah, because I think passion really is, it builds the motivation to learn, and if you have that motivation, I think you can achieve a lot. Actually, on that note, at Facebook, we had this saying from HR, was that your strengths are not necessarily what you're good at. And I think what that means is that sometimes your strength is just something that you're passionate about, and then it's the job of like your mentor or somebody else to help you to make that your or to become better at that. But I do think that the most important thing is passion, because I think if you have talent without passion, it's still sort of a torture to do it, right? I think most people who are talented at something are passionate about it, and so the combination of those two is very powerful. If you think of a figure skater, who's talented at figure skating, they're probably also passionate about it, and so that's why I think those two go together. If you have passion but no talent, I think that's fine, because you can always learn, and if you have the willingness to learn and put in the time, I think passion is sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's another question about motivation. Can you motivate employees? Is this possible to learn?
I guess you would have to find an incentive, right? So if I learn something on my own on Friday, my incentive is that I want to become better at it because I'm passionate about it. If there is no incentive and you ask somebody to learn something, which is what most of probably people's experience in high school or middle school is, then it becomes tough. That's the point where people actually start to despise learning and they don't like school. And so I think that really you have to give people a reason to want to learn, right? If you can convince your employees that if you learn something and you become better at that, that will translate into being better at their jobs and maybe getting promoted or something like that. I think that could work. Ideally, you would have people learn about something that they enjoy doing. But certainly, I do think that if you want to, motivate employees to learn, you have to give them a reason to want to learn. It shouldn't be forced the way it is in school, where kids are really forced to learn, and most of them don't have really a, nobody knows why they have to learn. People just, adults tell kids that, you have to go to school because it's important. But they're not really taught or explained why it's important. And so that's what leads to resentment. So, to combat that, I think you have to give people a reason to learn. And if they understand that reason, I think they will do it on their own.
From my perspective, I think it's not possible to motivate people anyway, and it's not motivate people to get the ability to learn. What I think, what you can do is to create an environment where development and learning is natural. And it is natural. I think it's in our DNA. We have got a 8-year-old son, and when I see when he learned how to walk, how to write, more or less, if there's no this interference of school and marks and competition, it is joyful. It's really, I have the feeling this is really in our center of our human being. And I think sometime in our development, it happened that this elements of fear and competition and fear of failing and not being good enough and all this stuff coming like a shower on your body and on your being, and this keeps you away of trying things, And I think when you create, I mean, for me, the only way for organization to create such a culture is a fearless room. A fearless room it's anyway, psychology security is a name was studied by Google, who tried to figure out which kind of teams were more successful. It were not the methods, it were not the Scrum boards, it was not the design thinking method. It was all about trust. It's all about being safe in relationship with others. And so to be allowed to say something which is probably critical, to say something which is a risk, and to take a risk to fail. And this is of ordinary saying, but it's still so far away in everyday life in our organizations. And this has to be changed within the next years, because there's so many things to learn that only a room where this very natural origin approach that learning is a basic, natural, and joyful thing awakes, then learning will be experienced by people. Yeah, that's great, that's fun, that's something which is really joyful. So it's really my intention to get this away from this talk today. This is really one of our key, and as I said before in the beginning, we have no choice anyway, because if we are not going to develop ourselves as a people, not only an organization, I think now as a society, our behavior, our relationship, the way we are in the world, that there are so many things that we have to develop if we want to save our human mankind as a whole. So we have to develop and not to stick and to go think back and stuck in this egoism and all this stuff. So Manuela, was a lot to this topic, but very important.
There's another question about artificial intelligence. What are the human advantages to machine learning, and how will it be in 3 or 5 years?
Okay, so from what I understand, the question is how does AI sort of help humans? So if that is the question, I think where AI can help humans is in freeing up more time for tasks that AI is good at and that humans, or that might be annoying to humans. I think of AI more as automating tasks that humans can do, but are really not the best use of our complex and intelligent brains. I think humans are very good at critical thinking, complex problem solving, creativity. Those are things that machines are really bad at today and probably will be for the foreseeable future. So I think I think AI can free up humans' time to focus on those areas and do what we're good at, and less time on filling out Excel spreadsheets and doing like math in our head and tasks like that. So I think that's what's important. And when we think of AI, so like automating away jobs, and like is everybody going to be unemployed in a few years? I think it's really important to realize that AI today is really still relatively narrow. It cannot solve very complex problems that it couldn't have this discussion that we're having right now. It can't come up with a 5-year plan for a company. It cannot do that. Probably shouldn't be able to do that. And so I think what it will automate are certain tasks that where humans today are really like computers, like accountants. So if it's just about filling out Excel spreadsheets again, I think those are jobs that might be automated in the next few years, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it makes those processes faster, and the people who are doing those jobs can instead learn skills or learn jobs that are more creative or more I think less sort of like automatable. And so I think in that sense we should see AI as complementary to humans and freeing up our time to solve more complex problems. So yeah, I think that's what I think.
Maybe one sentence I would add that artificial intelligence doesn't, of course, it will reduce jobs and it will change the workforce, but it will, on the other hand, enable and force people to show up with their human skills, because artificial intelligence will not automate intuition, will not automate creativity, will not automate personal social relationships, and will not automate empathy. So, and we know from all the survey that this, and from my personal experience, this will be one of the key factors as leaders, as persons. It doesn't matter where, to develop your human skills and your human capacities and get away from this boring, sometimes, I don't know, data-driven jobs that sometimes like a slave in huge offices doing some things. So you can really, and this is really my mission, my vision for the next years, that people to get rid of their fear, to see the possibilities and see the chances. Like as you said, you can get all the information. You can go to Stanford via YouTube. You get all the courses. So there are so many possibilities, and what will be needed with the more human factor and the more human capacities, like I did mention before.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think, I do think that our world is not full of, it's not just all about efficiency. I mean, if you think of, like most supermarkets, the job of the cashier could be automated. And here in the US, and I think on Austria too, there's automated cashiers where you just scan your items. But people still like to go to the regular cashiers because they like saying hello to the cashier, and they like having a human conversation. And I think that empathy is also something that computers cannot replace, and that humans are very good at. And I would even say that empathy is you mentioned those 3 most important skills of the future. I think empathy is also a very important skill for the future. Being able to understand people, being able to solve the very, very complex emotional problems that arise in work, from like jealousy and confusion, fear, anger. It's a very, very complex subject, and I think that is very important. It's also important today where everybody is remote, and it's you can't see people's body language anymore. You're not sitting next to them. Understanding complex feelings is actually a very difficult task, and I think that's something that humans also need to focus on.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Another question: what would you recommend young people, Peter?
Yeah, I think what I would recommend to them is to try really hard to find something that they are passionate about, because I still think that is the number 1 most important thing. And I think part of that is just as early on as possible to explore. I think our education system doesn't do a very good job of giving kids the opportunity to explore different topics, or like different jobs, or different areas of their careers. And so they kind of just stumble into some career in the end, and then if they're not passionate about it, I think that's that limits their future. So I think exploring as many different careers as possible in the beginning is important, because that can lead to finding something that you care about. And so after this exploration, the passion, I think another thing that I would recommend people is to find a mentor, somebody who can really teach them whether it's in their profession that they find or just some personal mentor, somebody who is more experienced than them, who can teach them, the things that you don't learn in school. And I think most people are happy to help younger individuals. So I don't think that finding a mentor is too difficult, but I think it's very important, especially for young people, who are where a lot of things are still confusing. So I think those are important. And lastly, I think also to focus on like whatever people find for their passion. I think focusing on practice, not focusing on actually exercising that skill in the real world, getting internships as soon as possible, try doing personal projects. That's certainly the thing that helped me the most in my career was, the fact that for programming, I can, I don't need to actually be in a job to do it. I can just do it on my own on the weekend. And I think doing this, like practicing, is the best way to learn. And so getting practical experience in whatever people find is incredibly important, and doing that as early as possible is very important.
I really want to strengthen this, because this is very, very important, not to have this mind, this would be great to be an entrepreneur, would be great to be a clerk, would be great to be a doctor. Try as early as possible how it is, how it feels, how it looks like to be a doctor. Maybe it's not like this, what you have in your mind. So I really experienced it. Was very, very helpful to go as soon as possible into the field and experience. I really recommend the book Design Your Life, that they have this approach to explore things as soon as possible, to get an idea how it feels and looks like. Maybe it's different in your imagination. So, and to collect different approaches, it doesn't matter in which field, and then find your own way and resonance of what really suits to your life, which is the only life that you can live, your life, and not different one. And this is not easy. There's no the 5 rules, the 4 rules, and the 7 rules. It's a try and a go and a persistent feeling and experiencing and what is good for me. And that this doesn't mean that it's good for the other person or for the third person. So listen to your heart and to your intuition, what feels good for you. That would I like to add to your statement.
Absolutely.
Manuela?
Okay, what do you think about the university degree? I mean, Peter, you don't need it in the US, but what do you think in Europe? Should you finish the university or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very individual decision. I think in my case, because I did a lot of learning outside of university, my degree wasn't as important. I think, if the question is, do you need a university degree, to be successful in theory? I think the answer is no. I think, I'm a good example of the fact that it is possible to do without a degree. At the same time, I think for many people, a university degree is fantastic, because there's many people who come to university without having prior knowledge of the topic, and in that sense, they do actually learn things at university. The professors there do teach them things, and if they've never, been exposed to the topic before, I think it's a great way to learn. And it's very structured. A lot of people, I think one of the things that allowed me to succeed outside of college was that I was very self-sufficient, and I'm like an autodidact. I know how to learn on my own, but that's not a skill that we learn in school, and a lot of people aren't as good at learning on their own. And university it's a very structured environment. There's a professor. The professor tells you what's important. The professor tells you what to learn. They give you exercises. They give you exam. It's all sort of like laid out for you, and on a silver platter, and you just have to consume the books that they give you and write the tests, and then after 4 years you're ready for the job world. And so I think for people who aren't as self-sufficient and who like this idea of having the structured program, college is a great thing. And I mean, of course, in the US, it's also very expensive. It costs sometimes $80,000 a year for this first class service. But I think in that sense, it is important. What's interesting is that sort of in my, as I've told people over the years that I was a dropout and so on, mostly when people think about their college experience, if they ask themselves, should I have dropped out as well? If it's just about the knowledge, most people agree that their college degree taught them very little compared to what they learn on the job. And if it's just about learning skills, their college degree was actually quite useless and a bit of a waste of money. What people mostly end up not wanting to leave is actually the social experience. And most people think back to their college, what they really like is sort of like all the friends they had and the parties they had and sort of like the adventures they had, the exchange semesters to a different country, especially here in the US, where college is like this very all-encompassing experience with sports and with spring break and getting connections which are valuable for life. In fact, I think if I think back to my old team at Facebook or Facebook in general, I think 90% of people met their spouse in college, right? 90% of people met their lifelong partner in college. And so I think it's these social aspects which a lot of people wouldn't want to leave, and actually a lot of people, that's why what a lot of people think is the most important thing about college. And so I guess to answer the question is, do you need a college education? I think for the skills, no, absolutely not. If you can learn how to learn on your own. Do I think college is useless? I don't think so. I think it's valuable for those people who want a structured program and who aren't able to learn things on their own as easily. And it's also valuable for the social experiences, whether it's finding a spouse or for finding your future investment partner or your future co-CEO or co-founder. I think it's valuable for that. So bottom line is that it's very, very individual. Like I think it was a great decision for me to drop out. I would do it again every single time. I think it was the best decision I ever made in my life. But I think it's not the best decision for everybody. It's a very individual thing. What I wish would be more. What I wish is that it would be a more a less unorthodox option. Me dropping out, I still kind of like a rebel. And certainly in Europe, it would be kind of throwing away your future. Even here in the US, it has a certain stigma, saying that you didn't finish college, even though in high tech people think that's cool and they think it's smart. But if in a different industry would kind of mean that you're a loser. And what I wish is that this stigma would just go away, that we acknowledge that there's totally different paths that can both lead to success. One of them is going to college, another one is not going to college. And if we can acknowledge that those are both viable paths based on what is relevant to the individual, I think that would be beneficial to society.
This is really a great saying. I really can admit this because I studied, I don't know, 30 years ago law in Graz, and I remember it was the best time of my life. But from a social experience, we had so much fun. But the important things I didn't learn in university. I did learn them later on. And the second thing is, I know so many people did stuck in this pattern, being forced to get this degree, not being a loser. This kind of stigma to being a loser if you not finish your degree is still very strong, and is so strong that ministers, like the discussion last week with our minister Ashbah, like is so strong that people do everything to have this, I don't know, this title, mania. And this is really ridiculous because this will not will not solve our future problems and challenges. So this is really probably a little bit helpful, our talk, to get a little bit an inspiration that this has not be like this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Manuela?
Yeah, we have now 5 minutes left. And I would be interested in the homeschooling movement in the US, Peter.
Yeah, I think it's also a very interesting topic. Just to give some numbers, around 3% of students in the US are homeschooled. And what that means is that, what we mean with homeschooling here is that they are taught their entire middle, high school, primary school education is at home, and they are instructed by either of their parents or both parents. I think most common is that one of the parents stays at home, and just their job is to educate their kids. And there's plenty of resources online for basically picking a curriculum. And a lot of parents do it because they prefer to teach their kids what they think is important. They also, a lot of parents do it because they're actually afraid of sending kids to regular high school because of like bullying and psychological issues, or they just don't like what's being taught there, and so they just want to take the education of their children into their own hands. And it is relatively common. I mean, certainly now during the pandemic, everybody kind of became, a homeschooler. Just the difference is that in the homes, what we really call homeschooling here is when the parents do the teaching, and they do that full time. And what's interesting about the US is that there's differing regulations. I think in Europe, it would be pretty difficult to say that, no, my kid isn't going to normal school, I'm just going to teach them at home. In the US, there's 12 states which have absolutely no regulation on this, like Texas. You can, you don't even have to tell anybody. You can just, from one day to the next, pull your kids out of school and then teach them on their own. There's other states which, have certain standards, and some states which make it very hard. And I guess what's important here is that when you apply to college, most colleges will actually accept a homeschooling diploma, which is literally just your parents, writing down, over the last 8 years, I taught my kids this and I taught them that. And a lot of schools, or most schools, accept that as a viable alternative to a high school diploma. If you can show that, you taught them math and you taught them English history or whatever. And it's becoming more and more popular here.
Great.
Yeah, in Austria, we are suffering about the homeschooling right now.
Right.
But
Yeah,
I think it's not so easy.
No, I think certainly, it's very hard if you're doing it, next to your regular jobs. You do have to appreciate that, when people do homeschooling here, it's, they see it as their full-time job. And so, if your full-time job is to educate, that's makes it a bit easier, but I think it's still very hard. We all know that kids, aren't always easy, and so it's certainly not an easy thing. But there are some, there's some famous people in history who were homeschooled, like Thomas Edison, or Condoleezza Rice, who was the Secretary of State a few years ago. And also a lot of the elites in history, were schooled at home. They had a private tutor, or just their parents taught them. So I think it's certainly a viable option for those parents who are brave enough to do it.
It's still impossible in Austria when I see this discussion right now, which I understand that people have to care this. But it's apparently an increasing number of people who follow this in the US. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, we have 2 minutes left, so it would be great if you have a finishing statement for our participants about learning and how to learn and keep motivated to learn.
Yeah, I think maybe just to re-emphasize what I mentioned a few times, which is that the key to enjoying learning is to be passionate about what you're doing. Finding a passion makes learning very easy. The other thing to realize is that there are limitless courses, and there's limitless information online available for free by people who are experiencing who are exercising what they're doing every day. And so taking advantage of that is very important. And also so learning the skill of learning, the ability to teach oneself and not be reliant, on a teacher the way we are for, the 16 years of our regular education, but actually becoming your own teacher, becoming, the person who guides yourself to what is important, as opposed to relying on somebody to tell you what's important, just figuring that out on your own, and then making use of the internet and all those books out there to actually get that knowledge. So again, like finding a passion, learning how to learn on your own, I think that is very important for our kids. It's important for ourselves. It's important for everybody at any age, really.
To follow up this, because I'm 53, I could be your father, Peter. My age, sometimes people get a little bit bored and a little bit lazy, and we stay in a comfort zone. We know everything, and this kind of superficial self-sufficiency. but I experienced for myself the joy of learning. So it's very stimulating talk with guys like you, Peter, and other people who really see this as a deep insights feeling that's carry on. What I experienced from companies in Europe, this will be really not nice to have, but it really will be all or nothing. This will be the key factor for survive and for stay on in the game. This is really my deep believing, and my deep believing is my knowing experience is really joyful and really fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your participation, and you will get the record of the talk, and we also sent you the address of Peter's blog, which is very, very readable, especially if you're a young guy and you're interested in doing an internship or like this. And we would be happy if you will be at our next talks of the Art of Life as a participant. Thank you.